So let's talk something interesting that has been brought up to me a few times, which is always awkward. But prison relationships, there's so many different types. You got the prison relationships where both parties are incarcerated or one party is incarcerated. Um, or maybe the prison relationships that, you know, kind of evolve into free world relationships because they start with one or both parties incarcerated and then, both parties are free. So let's talk, um, I think if one party is incarcerated um, during a relationship, that definitely puts a lot of strain on a relationship. I've had situations where I was a free person in a relationship with an incarcerated person. I think a lot of times, like any relationship, the foundation really kind of defines the direction of the relationship. I think if you knew someone prior to incarceration, you were their incarceration, there's a better likelihood because y'all know each other better. That and you have a stronger foundation. I think there's a stronger likelihood of things working out in the long run. I think people who meet while incarcerated and one's incarcerated and one's not. I've seen some situations where these turn into marriages and whatnot. But I can say that the majority of them, just from my observation, when the incarcerated party comes home, kind of go up in smoke or turn into a dumpster fire. And I think that's because, if you're getting to know a person while they're incarcerated, you're getting to know a person during a time of their life where that's very transitional and they're kind of in duress and, and they don't have the freedoms that a person in the free world has. So they're also very limited, and a lot of these like met while incarcerated relationships seem to be, the party in the free world kind of financially supporting the incarcerated person because the incarcerated person just doesn't have the opportunity and means to support themselves, which I think makes them kind of motivates the incarcerated person to make them drag out, longer than they would have in the free world when there are issues, or makes the person who's incarcerated more likely to put up with more mess, as far as attitudes and drama and baggage. And then when a person comes home, they now have other options and they can be self-sufficient. And I think that dynamic kind of throws things into a tailspin. Or you kind of, anyone while they're incarcerated can tell you, and they may be telling the truth at the time. They want to do this, they want to do that, they intend to do this, they intend to do that when they come home. But the reality is when a person is re-entering into society, they're under an incredible amount of stress. The cards are kind of stacked against them. And, it's kind of like the whole thing, if you had $1 million, what would you do? We all have, several, scenarios that we would do, in our minds. But when that's applied in real life, a lot of people, hit the lotto small time for $1 million, couple million, $500,000. And most of these are people that would tell you that if that ever happened to them, prior to it happening, that they would start a business or they would do this, incredible investing and they would never struggle again. However, statistically, even people who hit for millions with an S, often find themselves in the same economic position or worse, when everything is said and done. Now, as far as, both parties being incarcerated type relationships, I get it. Why do we get in relationships? I think inmates get in relationships for the same reason that free people get in relationships. Some people are opportunists. They're just looking for someone to emotionally cling on to like a life raft. Some people want protection, which is obviously a bigger issue for the incarcerated than the free. Some people want monetary gain. Some people are incredibly lonely and just mostly, are angling for companionship. I think a lot of times when two people get in a relationship, free or incarcerated, unless their motives are very similar, then again, I guess if both your motives was a financial come up, then you're going to have a lot of problems. But if your emotions are similar in the sense of you just want a partner or you just want physical intimacy or you want emotional companionship, then I think there's a greater chance of things working. And I've seen a lot of, and read a lot of, videos and articles by former inmates and current inmates. And pretty much the standard going, philosophy is never get in a relationship with another inmate while you're incarcerated. Because, relationships get messy, in the free world. But under the stress and kind of in the vacuum, the fishbowl of prison life, there's a lot more room for drama. There's a lot more room for hurt feelings. There's a lot more room when you can't, spend the night together, or have intimacy the way you can in the free world. When you take that out of the relationship, when all intimacy is very secretive and rushed, when there's potentially some economic difficulty on both ends, when you don't know each other from the free world, and then, people in prison, men's and women's, from what I've heard and read and seen, you know, tend to have a lot of drama. I mean, people are bored. And the thing is, there's some people that are kind of inclined to the gossip and the drama and the foolery. But even people that aren't generally inclined to it, a lot of times find themselves in the mix of the fishbowl drama because of the fact that they're in the fishbowl, you know. So I think for me personally, would I, be in a relationship in the free world while my partner's incarcerated? Absolutely. For me, that doesn't hinder me. Now, if the person, whether incarcerated or not, if the situation is they did something that I'm just completely 100% intolerant towards, if they exploited elderly people, if they victimized women or children or whatever. I mean, these are things, whether you go to prison or not, that are complete deal breakers for me. But, you know, I think that, I know there's a lot of difficulty having been down that road, I know that it's very emotionally trying. Um, I also know that as a woman, and I believe that men, you know, have a different role than women in relationships and man-woman monogamous relationships. For me, now, if you feel differently or your situation is different, it's working out. That's great. I'm not trying to change anybody's views. I'm not trying to make anybody, adopt my mindset. I'm just speaking of my mindset. I look at a man in a relationship with me as a protector and a provider. So, and I've seen dudes who've been incarcerated that are able to provide protection and financial assistance and things like that, and emotional support and all that from prison to their partner on the outside. So I know it's doable. Um, but would I get into a relationship while incarcerated? No. I mean, I can appreciate the female form as much as any other, person on the planet, and certain aspects of that, are visually appealing. But, there are, and I'm trying to keep this as adult, but not icky as possible. But there are certainly aspects of the female anatomy that I don't want nowhere near me. Nowhere near me. And that's just the physical. And then if you talk about the psychological, female, feminine energy, a lot of women think drama is cute. A lot of women think jealousy is a form of passion, when really it's a form of insecurity and oftentimes conflict. I don't like conflict. I don't like drama. I understand mental illness. I have some mental illness. Most people that I know, if you really get to know them and they're comfortable, will disclose to you that they have some type of mental illness of some sort, whether it's periodic depression, periodic anxiety, whatever. But we live in a culture where it's kind of glamorized, There are songs and movies about the crazy bitch and how she's, this empowered, incredible, magical creature. And I don't agree with that. I think that a person who has mental health issues that they are aware of and they choose to go unchecked and make no effort to control or redirect is a person who clearly is just likes their instability. And I say that if, you're aware of your issues and you just choose being the key word and aware being the key word, to completely leave it unchecked and just kind of live on the fly, live on, kind of wing it. You're not a person who takes a lot of accountability or thinks things out long term. To me, that's a person who, man or woman, who definitely is more of a liability than an asset. And I try to be an asset in one way or another to the few people in my close circle, whether it be, romantically, people I'm involved with, or personally, socially, professionally, whatever the situation. If you're someone in my immediate circle, I definitely strive to be an asset to you in some type of way. And I strive to not be a liability. I make conscious choices to minimize or prevent the level of liability I am in your life. And that's because I know for me personally, I look at, how is a person a liability? How are they an asset? And if they're more a liability in my life than an asset, then I'm pretty quick to create some distance and cut them off. So, and I don't want to be, distance between me and those that I care about or in my circle, nor do I want to be cut off from those in my circle. So I try to, basically treat people how I want them to treat me and assess, my relationships with others, let that dictate how I treat people, assume that I'm going to be assessed on the same merits or the same basis that I assess people. But can you imagine, think about the worst relationship you've been in, or some of the bad ones, because I know some of us, I'm 40 years old, some of us are a little older, we've had more than a couple relationships in life. But think about some of the worst ones. Now imagine if you had to go through that relationship while in prison, with the other person in prison with you, possibly living on the same housing unit or pod. And there's a constant audience of hundreds of other people, maybe thousands, depending on where you're at, that are critiquing and gossiping and that really want you to be a train wreck and a dumpster fire, your relationship to be a train wreck or a dumpster fire for their own personal entertainment. Imagine how much crazier that relationship would have been, or how much more out of control things would have gotten. And so, it's just not for me. I think that the most likely, to be successful relationship in regards to relationships with inmates would be those who knew each other prior to incarceration, and were good friends or were in a relationship of some sort, carried that through their incarceration. You would have to both be very mature, strong people, and then, continued that relationship, again in the free world, kind of, kept it just smooth beginning to end, where the incarceration aspect was just a small chapter of the big picture of the relationship. But I feel like, can you meet a person who's incarcerated, or while you're incarcerated, that's in the free world, that would be a good fit for you and make things work? It's possible. I mean, anything is possible. I kind of feel like when a person is in transitional points in their life, such as incarceration, you're going from one level or one aspect of your life, one whole different plane of existence to another. I think anytime people are in any major transition, it's a bad time to start relationships. Friendships, sure. Friendships, you can grow a friend, in the best or worst of circumstances. But romantic relationships, I feel like those are just generally a bad idea when you're at a transitional point in your life. And I definitely feel like probably one of the worst case scenarios or worst ideas for when to start a relationship during a high stress or transitional period would certainly be when you're an inmate and the other party is an inmate in your facility as well. I feel like, I see little potential for that working out. So let me know what y'all think. Have y'all ever dated, or been married to a person who was incarcerated? Did you meet while incarcerated? Did you meet prior to their incarceration or part of your incarceration? How did the relationship pan out during the incarceration? Was it still standing when you came home, or they came home? And where's it at now? Or just other relationships you've observed. But as far as inmate relationships. Now, keep in mind, too, that, and I'm speaking on romantic relationships, but I do understand that in women's prisons, women aren't really into the whole division by race and gangs thing. They're more into dividing themselves up into, like, pseudo-families, right? Now, those relationships, I understand. I could see myself being part of a pseudo-family during my prison stint. And keeping some of those, relationships after prison, if someone's like an auntie, and they're level-headed and they're wise and insightful, and I met this person while I'm in incarceration, they've kind of taken that role in my life, I would certainly want to keep in contact with them when I came home. Because, a person being incarcerated to me is like a person living 3 states away. They're more difficult to see. Communication is more strained. You're not going to really see each other in person very often, but they're still people. On a very basic level, we are all pretty much the same. Our needs are pretty much the same. Most people's desires in life are very similar, at a core level. And, I know that we all need companionship. We all need support. We all from time to time I wouldn't really say need, but want, physical intimacy. But I think emotional intimacy trumps physical intimacy. I certainly, am okay with long periods of time, like years, without physical intimacy of a romantic nature, in exchange for consistent emotional intimacy. But then again, that's how I think, that's how I operate. I know some people that are very opposite of that. I know people that lose their mind if they go a short period of time without physical intimacy. But emotional intimacy, may be something that they typically lack in life or in their relationships. But for me personally, emotional intimacy is kind of everything. And what are your thoughts? This is another thing too on this topic. Someone mentioned me the other day that a hypothetical situation where if a person's incarcerated and they have a significant other in the free world, a husband, a wife, the committed relationship, whatever. And while they're incarcerated, they are fraternizing or talking to, other people, in the free world, like people that go on like the pen pal sites and put up a profile for themselves, that are in the free world. And there's that emotional intimacy. And, a lot of people say, emotional intimacy is cheating, is infidelity. And that's of course because there's a fear attached to that, for the other party, for the other partner, that emotional intimacy will lead to physical intimacy. More often than not, that's kind of the root of why they find it so concerning. But if one person is incarcerated and they're having emotional intimacy with other parties, is that still something that people find, would label as cheating and potentially a deal breaker? Knowing that there's no possibility for physical intimacy? And if so, why? Why would that emotional intimacy stir up security when there's insecurity, when there's no wiggle room? You know what I mean? For like physical intimacy. Maybe it's an insecurity thing and a fear of being like replaced. Maybe you feel, or maybe they feel that if their partner, while incarcerated, builds emotional ties to other people, when they come home, they may choose those other people over them, like just because it's something new. Like, I don't know. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about your experience as an inmate or as a person in the free world dealing with an inmate or whatever, with relationships with inmates, or as an inmate having relationships with people in the free world, or inter-inmate relationships, if that's a term. I don't know. I may have just made that up. But, I'd love to hear your perspective on it, your thoughts, maybe your experiences. That's kind of my thoughts about the whole thing. What I think is for me, okay, not okay, could work, definitely wouldn't work out, whatever. But, we're all individual people. We all have our own perspective, our own experience, and our own priorities and prerogatives. So I'm curious to hear yours. So let's talk inmate relationships.